This event happened sometime in the 90s and occurred in Stockton, California. I forgot the actual name of the park. I remember it being called 8th Street Park. It was close to the I-5 freeway. If you're familiar with this place, it had a soccer field, restrooms, playgrounds, and a river on top of the hill. People gambled there, sold food, and it was a great place for family to hang out. We used to go there a lot with my parents. My dad would be gambling and my mom would gossip with her friends. Most of the kids would just play around freely with no worries. I remember this day clearly. It was a breezy, sunny day. The smell of the air was like a rose unfolding, and the distinct scent makes you just want to lay down, close your eyes, and smell the aroma in the air. You could still hear the sounds of kids playing in the background, cars passing by, and the sounds of dice being thrown. An hour later, Mother Nature decided that she wanted to change the weather. Clouds came in, and it started to sprinkle a little bit. With my moment ruined, I decided to go up the hill and look at the river. I got to the top of the hill and looked across the river. It was a beautiful view, but I noticed something strange. The water level was rising at a slow pace. It was similar to how when we slip into a bathtub and the water rises due to our weight. There were some adults where I was at and other kids too. Then it started to rain harder, but nosy me decided to just stay up there. I then heard one of the adults yell out, "Snake! Snake!" I looked at the ground and there was no snake around me. Then I looked into the river. There was a humongous snake serpent creature coming down the river at a fast pace. People around me were running, but I stood there in shock. There was a woman standing on top of the snake's head. She stood up and turned her head and looked at me. I was still paralyzed from the shock and couldn't move. Her mouth didn't move, but she spoke to me. She told me to not be afraid. She was looking for someone. And then she just kept on going down the stream. I guess my mom heard the adults talking and found me on top of the hill. She grabbed my hands and asked me if I saw anything. I said I didn't, but I told her we couldn't come to this park for a while. I believe 1 week or 2 weeks later, 3 kids drowned there. I never knew the reason, but I remember what that lady said and how she said it to me. This happened way back in Laos. My dad told me that back in the days, there were a lot of mythical and powerful spirits that wandered all over Laos. This story is about my dad's older brother. I would always hear stories about how nice of a person he was, and how their entire family were very well known. Well, anyways, just after 2 to 3 years after the Secret War, my uncle decided to go on to be a soldier. He'd be away from home for quite some time to train, and he'd visit occasionally. One day, the army troops decided to train by a huge lake. They would go in groups and scout the area for practice. My uncle's group then came across one part of the lake that was covered in green moss or something, so they decided to rest there for a bit. My uncle then saw a huge snake-like shadow moving in the green lake, and he got all paranoid about it being a ghost or something. So then he divided to tell the other people in his troop to keep on going. A month went by and he came back to visit the family. My dad and his other brother were laying on the bed. When my uncle entered the house, my dad saw a dark shadow running behind him, and suddenly it ran underneath their bed. So he quickly jumped off and looked under it, but nothing was there. He thought that he could have been seeing things. The next day, my uncle gave my dad some money that he got from being in the army. This was so my dad could go watch movies with friends. Later that day, my uncle got really sick and wasn't able to stand properly. My grandpa would give him things like Hmong medicine, but that didn't work either. In the afternoon, my uncle felt like he had to use the restroom. My grandpa offered to take him, but my uncle refused, saying that it was too embarrassing, so he went alone. 2 to 3 hours later, my grandpa got really worried because he was gone for so long, so he got up and went to go check on my uncle. There he discovered the dead corpse of my uncle, all pale and lifeless. My grandpa gathered the entire family. My dad quickly ran back from the movies to see what happened. They couldn't believe that he passed away. That morning he was just perfectly fine. The next morning, they did a Hmong funeral and got the shaman to come and check out how my uncle died. The shaman said that while he was training near the big lake, he saw something and got frightened and lost his spirit there. A dragon lady took interest of him and wanted him to be her husband. It was because of this that he passed away. My sister-in-law told me that back in Thailand, her aunt was heading to the garden. On the way there, she got tired and took a nap under the tree by a lake. She fell into this very deep sleep. I guess the villagers found her, and she was somewhat in a coma. They took her back to the village to her parents' house. They know she wasn't dead because they could still feel her breathing, and she still had a pulse. A couple of days later, she woke up. Her parents asked her what happened and how did she get into that condition. She didn't know that she was in a coma for a couple of days. She said that she had the weirdest dream. She dreamt that when she fell asleep, a young man came to her and took her to his kingdom and wanted to marry her. She told him that she doesn't know him and that he should go find her parents first because they would be worried about her. He tried to grab her wrist and tell her to stay, but she was wearing one of those Hmong bracelets with those two snake heads. The two snake heads suddenly came alive, trying to bite the hand of the guy when he tried to grab her. He told her to go back home and take it off, and that he would be waiting for her. After telling her parents the story, they went to find a shaman and told him about it. He said for her to never take off the bracelet, and so she never took it off. After that day, after talking to the shaman, she dreamt about him. In the dream, he asked her why she hadn't taken off the bracelet yet. She told him that she will never take it off and for him to leave because she won't marry him. The next day, when her parents woke up, they saw her sitting outside just staring at the sky. She wouldn't or couldn't talk. She just kept staring on at the sky for a week. The shaman heard of this news and came back from the other villages. The parents then paid the shaman to fix their daughter. The next day, she was okay again. Her parents asked what happened to her. The shaman then replied, "A dragon spirit had been trying to take her for a while. When she took a nap by his lake, he came and took her to marry. She didn't want to marry him, so that's why he tried to grab her. The bracelet with the two snake heads will protect her. After I met with you, she dreamt about him and told him to go away. The spirit got mad and showed her his real form. Because of this, she kept on looking up because dragons are so tall, much taller than the trees. I guess after that she got better because my sister-in-law told me that part, and now her aunt is happily married and living in the US. My older sister was born about 28 years ago when my parents were still living in Laos. In the village that they were living in at the time, villagers were looking for gold in the riverbanks nearby. I heard my grandfather say that a villager promised the land or river spirit a human sacrifice for good gold. One day, my mother took my sister, who was 1 year old, to bathe in the river. Out of nowhere, my mother saw a streak of blood on her forehead. My sister wasn't hurt or anything. My mother quickly washed it away and she went back home. She didn't think much of it. Not too long after that, my parents had a huge argument. My father back then liked to go court girls and left my mother to fend for the family. With that argument, my father angrily slashed the front door, and as you know, houses back then were made out of straw. He did it out of anger and said some very hurtful words to my mother. A few days later, my sister became sick. My parents went and asked an uncle to come onang. After he was done, he told my parents that he couldn't really help them. My sister was marked by a spirit, and along with my dad slashing the front door out of anger, he gave the spirit permission to come and take my sister. The house spirits were cut down and couldn't help. Within a short period of time, my sister passed away. My grandfather said that it was the land or river spirit that came to take my sister away, the one that the villager promised to sacrifice for. The villager didn't keep his promise and fled the village, and in return, many other villagers paid the price. My mother was upset, but eventually she had me and my siblings. About 4 years ago, while I was sitting in my room, my younger sister came crying to me. She said that while she was in the bathroom, out of nowhere, a random drop of blood fell on her arm. It wasn't a small drop, it was quite big. She washed it off quickly, but got really scared because she had seen a Hmong movie where a man randomly found a drop of blood on him and was soon later taken away by a dragon spirit. I asked her if it was just her nose bleeding or if she scratched herself, but she was serious that the blood appeared out of nowhere. We quickly told my mother, and that was when she told us the story of our older sister. She urgently got my grandfather to come oneng. My grandfather cut up a paper figure to use in his oneng to trade for my sister's spirit. He changed my sister's name and put leaves around our house to keep bad spirits away. The cause of her blood marking was from a dragon spirit. We used to go for family barbecues, maybe a little too much, by a river, and from there, a dragon spirit took a liking to my sister. The oneng added security and peace of mind to my sister, and I think we've only been back once since this has happened to her. So now, whenever we go out, near rivers, oceans, or forests, I don't sing and don't really talk about myself. According to elders, it's not good to sing, haikutia, or even talk highly about yourself. These things will attract bad spirits. Also, it's not good to go to places like that too much. My mother told me that back in Laos, one of our neighbors had a very beautiful daughter named Ba. The whole village praised her beauty, and all the men wanted to date her. Since all the houses were bamboo huts, my mother said that they would hear guys talking to Ba every night. One night, my mother woke up to go use the bathroom outside, and she heard a group of men kidnapping a girl. She was curious, so she walked toward the group of men and saw them kidnapping the neighbor's daughter, Ba. My mom saw Ba crying and a guy holding her hand, saying, "Don't cry, if I get married to you, I will love you." And back then, since this was a normal practice, but not anymore because of obvious reasons, my mom was like, oh, I guess they got a new son-in-law. And so she did her business and went back into the house to sleep. The next morning, my parents were woken up by a very loud cry from the neighbor's house. My dad told my mom to go check up on the neighbor. My mom told my dad not to worry and said that she saw a group of men kidnapping the neighbor's daughter last night. She said maybe the mother is just crying because her daughter got married. All of a sudden, they heard both the neighbors cry, so they decided to go check up on them. When my father got to the neighbor's house, he found out that Ba had passed away in her sleep. My mom got very scared and became ill. Because of this, my dad sought the help of a shaman to come and oneng for her. After that, the shaman told my parents that the group of men my mom saw kidnapping Ba were not human. Because the whole village kept on praising Ba's beauty, a dragon spirit had come to marry her. My mom wasn't supposed to see them, but because she was at the wrong place at the wrong time, she saw them, and one of them saw her. A couple of days later, Ba's mother had a dream that her daughter had come with her husband to visit. Ba's husband was very handsome, and he wore a very bright Hmong outfit with a lot of silver coins. They came to Wachong and pay Ba's dowry. Before Ba left, she told her mother not to worry and said that she was happy. When she woke up, she looked under her pillow and saw a bunch of leaves. I have been having dreams about the other world, like dragons, ghosts, spirits, and etc. These dreams are still happening to this day. Today, I'll only be telling one because it's a long dream. It was about a Doja, and this happened 3 months ago. I came back from school and felt tired, so I laid down on the couch. I didn't bother doing any chores even though my mom told me because my uncles were coming to visit. The dream went like this. My family was having a barbecue in our backyard. In our backyard, there lives a small pond. Somehow, in my dream, the pond was more like a waterfall with huge rocks around it. My uncles and my dad were arguing about something. Then they started to get into a physical fight, so while that was happening, a huge whale-like fish came out of the water, but half of its tail was scaly. It did a flip that whales typically do, and as it came out of the water, it turned into a handsome young man. He had great wavy, flipped back hair, his face structures were perfect, and his figure was strong and manly. Anyways, he came out of the water, and he asked my dad and my uncles to stop because it was not going to get anywhere. They did, but later he was talking to me, just about how life was going on and things like that. I was really happy. It felt like we were the happiest people together. In this dream, time flew by fast because we did almost everything couples would do together. We would play fight, joke around, have trips to places, kissed in the rain, and etc. But after the barbecue, while we were cleaning up, he said he had to leave and go back into the water. As he walked back into the water, I was devastated, and I waited for days for him to come back. Every day after school, I would sit on our back porch, or even by the water, seeing if he would pop his head out, but he never showed up again. Months went by, and he finally popped out, but in the whale-like form. While in the dream, I was the happiest person because I got to see him. Then he came out in a human form, and he said to me that it was time for me to go. I asked where, and he said to just follow him. Me being in a happy mood, I followed him. He grabbed onto my hand and we slowly walked towards the water. By the time I regained focus, it was too late, and I was already under the water. But it wasn't pretty under the sea like The Little Mermaid. It was pitch black like squid ink. And then suddenly the world turned upside down, and it spinned. Out of nowhere, we were in front of this beautiful kingdom. He looked like a prince standing next to me. I was wearing different clothes. He was still holding on to my hand. As he walked, I followed him. We went into his house, and his father was in his chair in front of us with his other family members as if they were waiting for me. They all had scale-like skin on their arms but were still human. The girls had glitter shimmering around them, and they all looked so happy. They were a beautiful family. I don't know why, but I was really happy to still be with him. Later on, he told me that this underworld water is not my home, and I can't go back. I was still very happy, and I didn't care if I couldn't go back. All I wanted was to be by him. It felt like I had stayed with him for at least a week. Then, while he and I were getting ready for bed, I felt like something stabbed my back. As he tried to grab onto me, I had already vanished in thin air. At that moment before I vanished, I got one last glimpse of him, but it seemed as if from the side, someone or something shot him. After all that, I woke up and I was super dizzy. It felt like a migraine, but it wasn't. I asked my parents what happened because they were just surrounding me, and my uncles and my aunts were there. They looked frightened and confused and worried all at the same time. Later, they told me that I fell asleep after I came back from school, but I didn't wake up for 2 days straight. My mom had to perform a ritual. She said that there was a dragon spirit watching over me, but after spending time around me, he fell in love and wanted to marry me. He took my soul, but since he and his family didn't do a wedding yet, I wasn't included as part of their family, so that was how my mom got my soul back. I asked about the last thing I saw and about who shot him. My mom replied saying that it was her, but he was still alive since he's a spirit and cannot die. As I looked around, at every corner of the house was a small bowl of rice, and there was a red and white string tied to my wrist, my ankle, and one around my neck. As I went to shower, I saw some bruises on the side of my stomach and down my thighs. Every time I looked into the mirror, it looked like he was still there by my side, and I was wearing the same clothes when I was under the water. I knew it was just my imagination and our reflection. I was just hallucinating. But then as I leaned to look closer, it looked like I was growing scales on the side of my face, but really wasn't. Then I felt wind coming by and a voice saying, "Why did you leave me with sorrow? Why did you let your parents take you back? Why did you have them kill me? I thought you were happy with me. I won't forget you, so don't forget me. I love you." Even though I still have dreams of other love affairs with other spirits, I never had one with that Doja again. To be honest, it was the best dream I've had. I couldn't stop thinking about it when I woke up. Man, sounds like someone watches too many Chinese dramas. Just go get a real life boyfriend instead, gosh.